Hi, it is uploading. I got freezing cold, so I put the heater on. Don't know if you can hear that. And we're back into it. We're still on chapter 1. Bo has just fallen asleep. He's gonna go to school in the morning. And meet the Cullens. Eventually. So, the rest of chapter 1. I didn't sleep well that night, even after I finally got my head to shut up. The constant whooshing of the rain and wind across the roof wouldn't fade into the background. I pulled the old quilt over my head, and later added the pillow too. But I couldn't fall asleep until after midnight, when the rain finally settled into a quiet drizzle. Thick fog was all I could see out my window in the morning, and I could feel the claustrophobia creeping up on me. You could never see the sky here. It was like that prison cage I'd imagined this earlier. Breakfast with Charlie was quiet. He wished me good luck at school. I thanked him, knowing his hope was a waste of time. Good luck tended to avoid me. Charlie left first, off to the police station that was his wife and family. You're his family. You awful boy. After he left, I sat at the old square oak table in one of the 3 unmatching chairs and stared at the familiar kitchen with its dark panelled walls, bright yellow cabinets, and white linoleum floor. This is Flora. Nothing had changed. My mum had painted the cabinets 18 years ago, trying to bring some sunshine into the house. Over the small fireplace in the adjoining microscopic family room. Yes, hello, darling. There you go. Do you go? It's not in there. Over the small fireplace in the adjoining microscopic family room was a row of pictures. First, a wedding picture of Charlie and my mum in Las Vegas. She's so kissy. Then one of the 3 of us in the hospital after I was born, taken by a helpful nurse, that's important, followed by the procession of my school pictures up to this year's. These were embarrassing to look at. The bad haircuts, the braces years, the acne that had finally cleared up. I would have to see what I could do to get Charlie to put them somewhere else. Oh, at least while I was living here. At least while I was living here. Oh my gosh, such a heavy baby. She's buried. It was impossible being in this house not to realize that Charlie had never gotten over my mum. It made me uncomfortable. I didn't want to be too early to school, but I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I put on my jacket, thick, non-breathing plastic like a biohazard suit, and headed out into the rain. It was just drizzling still, not enough to soak me through immediately as I reached for the house key. It was always hidden under the eave by the door, and locked up. The sloshing of my new waterproof boots sounded weird. I missed the normal crunch of gravel as I walked. Inside the truck it was nice and dry. Oh, I'm so glad. So glad. Either Bonnie or Charlie had obviously cleaned it up, but the tan upholstered seats still smelled faintly of tobacco, gasoline, and peppermint. The engine started quickly, which was a relief, but loudly, roaring to life and then idling at top volume. Well, a truck this old was bound to have a flaw. The antique radio worked, a bonus I hadn't expected. Finding the school wasn't difficult. Like most other things, it was just off the highway. It wasn't obvious at first that it was a school. Only the sign, which declared it to be Forks High School, clued me in. It looked like a collection of matching houses built with maroon-coloured bricks. There were so many trees and shrubs I couldn't see its size at first. Where was the feel of the institution, I thought? Where were the chain-link fences, the metal detectors? This is completely alien to me. I'm a foreign girl. I parked by the first building, which had a small sign over the door reading, Front Office. He's a genius. No one else was parked there, so I was sure it was off limits, but I decided I would get directions inside instead of circling around the rain like an idiot. Inside it was brightly lit and warmer than I'd hoped. The office was small. There was a little waiting area with padded folding chairs, orange-flecked commercial carpet, notices and awards cluttering the walls, and a big clock ticking loudly. Plants grew everywhere in large plastic pots, as if there weren't enough greenery outside. This guy hates trees, he hates rain, he hates his parents. He doesn't hate Florabella. Look at the face on her. Look, say hello to internet. No. Okay. The room was cut in half by a long counter, cluttered with wire baskets full of papers and brightly coloured flyers taped to the front. There were 3 desks behind the counter. A round, balding man in glasses sat at one. Oh, I'm in it. He was wearing a t-shirt, which immediately made me feel overdressed for the weather. The balding man looked up. Can I help you? I'm Beau Swan, I informed him, without giggling somehow. That's not in there. And saw the quick recognition in his eyes. I was expected. Already the subject of gossip, the chief's son, the one with the unstable mum, come home at last. It just makes this sound worse and worse, doesn't it? Of course, he said. He dug through a leaning stack of papers on his desk till he found the ones he was looking for. I have your schedule right here, Beaufort, and a map of the school. It's not Isabeau, it's Beaufort. That's nice. Sorry, but it's funny. It's funny. He brought several sheets to the counter to show me. It's Beau, please. Oh, sure, Beau. Yeah, I would probably go for something that sounds like my initials were B.O. rather than tell everyone in a new high school my name was Beaufort. He went through my classes for me, highlighting the best route to each on the map, and gave me a slip to have each teacher sign, which I was to bring back at the end of the day. Oh, this is just... It's like I'm there. It's like I'm there being bored to suicide. But I'm not. He smiled at me and hoped, like Charlie, that I would like it here in Forks. I smiled back as convincingly as I could. When I went back out to my truck, other students were starting to arrive. I drove around the school, following the line of traffic. Most of the cars were older, like mine, nothing flashy. At home, I'd lived in one of the few lower-income neighbourhoods that were included in the Paradise Valley district. It was a common thing to see a new Mercedes or Porsche in the student lot. The nicest car here was, can you guess? Can you guess this? The nicest car here was a brand new silver Volvo. It's Edward Cullen's car. It's Edward Cullen's car. He drives a Volvo because it makes him giggle, I think. A brand new silver Volvo, and it stood out. Still, I cut the engine as soon as I was in a spot, so that the ear-splitting volume wouldn't draw attention to me. I looked at the map in the truck, trying to memorize it now. Hopefully I wouldn't have to walk around with it stuck in front of my nose all day. I stuffed everything in my backpack, slung the strap over my shoulder, and sucked in a huge breath. Like that. It won't be that bad, I lied to myself. Seriously though, this wasn't a life and death situation. It was just high school. Did you read the prologue with me? It's life and death. It's not like anyone was going to bite me. I finally exhaled. Oh, sorry, I should have held my breath the whole time. And stepped out of the truck. I pulled my hood down over my face as I walked to the sidewalk, crowded with teenagers. My plain black jacket didn't stand out. I was glad to see... Oh, sorry, I thought it was a full stop. My plain black jacket didn't stand out, I was glad to see, although there wasn't much I could do about my height. I hunched my shoulders and kept my head down. Once I got around the cafeteria, Building 3 was easy to spot. A large black 3 was painted on a white square on the east corner. I followed 2 unisex raincoats through the door. They probably have people inside them. The classroom was small. The people in front of me stopped just inside the door to hang up their coats on a long row of hooks. I copied them. They were 2 girls, one a porcelain-coloured blonde, the other also pale with light brown hair. At least my skin wouldn't be a standout here. I took the slip up to the teacher, a narrow woman with thinning hair, whose desk had a nameplate identifying her as Ms. Mason. I think this is swapped as well, but I can't remember. She gawked at me when she saw my name. Discouraging. And I could feel my blood rush into my face, no doubt forming unattractive splotches across my cheeks and neck. At least she sent me to an empty desk at the back without introducing me to the class. I tried to fold myself into the little desk as inconspicuously as possible. Okay, when I was at school, our desks had, like, they opened. You opened the lid of your desk and there was a space inside, and that's where you kept all your stuff, not in a locker. And I'm trying to imagine this guy, like, trying to get into the desk and pull it shut over top of him. I'm sorry. Floor has settled down here now. Sorry, I'm... It was harder for my new classmates to stare at me in the back, but somehow they managed. I kept my eyes down to the reading list the teacher had given me. It was pretty basic. Bronte, Shakespeare, Chaucer, Faulkner. I'd already read everything. This was comforting. And boring. Oh, you read Chaucer? Did you? Yeah. I wondered if my mum would send me my folder of old essays, or if she would think that was cheating. I went through different arguments with her in my head while the teacher droned on. When the bell rang, a pale, skinny girl with skin problems and hair black as an oil slick leaned across the table to talk to me. "You're Beaufort Swan, aren't you?" Beaufort. She gave off the vibe of an overly helpful chess club type. Beau, I corrected. Everyone within a 3C radius turned to look at me. "Where's your next class?" she asked. I had to check in my bag. Government. Government is the class? Government with Jefferson in Building 6. There was nowhere to look without meeting curious eyes. "I'm headed towards Building 4. I could show you the way." Definitely over-helpful. "America," she added. I forced a smile. Thanks. This guy is so unlikable already. We got our jackets and headed out into the rain, which had picked up. Several people seemed to be walking too close behind us, like they were trying to eavesdrop or something. I hoped I wasn't getting paranoid. "So, this is a lot different than Phoenix, huh?" she asked, being normal and trying to make conversation. It doesn't say. "Very. It doesn't rain much there, does it? 3 or 4 times a year. Wow, what must that be like?" she wondered. "Sunny," I told her. "You don't look very tan." "My mother is part albino." She studied my face uneasily, and I stifled a groan. It looked like clouds and a sense of humour didn't mix. A few months of this, and I'd forget how to use sarcasm. You can't be part albino. Can you? No. Come on. We walked around the cafeteria to the south buildings by the gym. Erica followed me right to the door, even though it was clearly marked. "Well, good luck," she said as I touched the handle. "Maybe we'll have some other classes together." She sounded hopeful. Why? I smiled at her, in what I hoped was not an encouraging way, and went inside. The rest of the morning passed in about the same way. My trigonometry teacher, Ms. Varner, who I would have disliked anyway just because of the subject she taught, was the only one who made me stand in front of the class and introduce myself. I stammered, went splotchy red, and tripped over my own boots on my way back to my seat. Yeah, I mean, same. After 2 classes, oh guys, he hasn't even met the Coens yet. After 2 classes, I started to recognize some of the faces in each room. There was always someone braver than the others who would introduce themselves and ask me questions about how I was liking forks. I tried to be diplomatic, but mostly I just lied a lot. At least I never needed the map. In every class, the teacher started out calling me Beaufort, and though I corrected them immediately, it was depressing. It had taken me years to live down Beaufort. Thank you so much, Grandpa, for dying just months before I was born and making my mum feel obligated to honour you. No one at home even remembered that Bo was just a nickname anymore. Now I had to start all over again. Okay, so his mother's father dies a few months before he's born. And afterwards she sort of never comes right. And he sort of looks after her. And his dad is fine with that. I don't know, it all sounds really sad. One guy sat next to me in both Trig and Spanish. And he walked with me to the cafeteria for lunch. He was short, not even up to my shoulder, but his crazy curly hair made up some of the difference between our heights. I couldn't remember his name, so I smiled and nodded as he rattled on about teachers and classes. I don't even try to keep up. He's such a shitty friend, oh my god. We sat at the end of a full table with several of his friends, who he introduced to me. Couldn't complain about the manners here. Yeah, not their manners. I forgot all their names as soon as he said them. They seemed to think it was cool that he'd invited me. The girl from English, Erica, waved at me from across the room, and they all laughed. Already the butt of the joke. It was probably a new record for me. But none of them seemed mean-spirited about it. It was there. Oh, here we go. It was there, sitting in the lunchroom, trying to make conversation with 7 curious strangers, that I first saw them. They were seated in the corner of the cafeteria, as far away from where I sat as possible in the long room. There were 5 of them. They weren't talking, and they weren't eating, although they each had a tray of food in front of them. They weren't gawking at me, unlike most of the other students, so it was safe to stare at them. But it was none of these things that caught my attention. Ow! Fuck off! Ow! That's not in there, that was just me. Florabella. They didn't look anything alike. There were 3 girls. One, I could tell, was super tall, even sitting down, maybe as tall as I was. Her legs went on forever. It's in italics. She looked like she might be the captain of the volleyball team, and I was pretty sure you wouldn't want to get in the way of one of her spikes. She had dark curly hair, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Another had hair the colour of honey hanging to her shoulders. She was not quite as tall as the brunette, but still probably taller than most of the other guys at my table. There was something intense about her. Edgy. It was kind of weird, but for some reason she made me think of this actress I'd seen in an action movie a few weeks ago, who took down a dozen guys with a machete. I remembered thinking then that I didn't buy it. There was no way the actress could have taken on that many bad guys in one. But I thought now that I might have bought it all if the character had been played by this girl. Okay. The last girl was smaller, with hair somewhere between red and brown, but different from either. Kind of metallic somehow, a bronzy colour. She looked younger than the other 2, who could have been in college easy. The 2 guys were opposites. The taller one, who was definitely taller than me, I'd guess 6'5" or even more, was clearly the school's star athlete, and the prom king, and the guy who always had dibs on whatever equipment he wanted in the weight room. His straight gold hair was wound into a bun on the back of his head, but there was nothing feminine about it. Somehow it made him look even more like a man. He was clearly too cool for this school, or any other I could imagine. Wow. The shorter guy was wiry, with his dark hair buzzed so short it was just a shadow across his scalp. That is the shortest description of any of them. Totally different, and yet they were all exactly alike. Every one of them was chalky pale, the palest of all the students living in this sunless town. Paler than me, the albino. You're not an albino, Bo. Come on, stop that. It's a medical condition. They all had very dark eyes. From here they looked black, despite the range in their hair colours. There were deep shadows under all their eyes, purple shadows, like bruises. Maybe the 5 of them had just pulled an all-nighter. Or maybe they were recovering from broken noses. Except that their noses, all their features, were straight and angular. But that wasn't why I couldn't look away. I stared because their faces, so different, so similar, were all insanely, inhumanly beautiful. The girls and the guys both beautiful. They were faces you never saw in real life, just airbrushed in magazines and on billboards. Or in a museum, painted by an old master as the face of an angel. It was hard to believe they were real. I decided the most beautiful of all was the smaller girl with the bronze-coloured hair, although I expected the female half of the student body would vote for the movie star blonde guy. They would be wrong, though. I mean, all of them were gorgeous, but the girl was something more than just beautiful. She was absolutely perfect. It was an upsetting, disturbing kind of perfection. It made my stomach uneasy. Okay. I'm just going to pretend all of that was normal. They were all looking away. Away from each other, away from the rest of the students, away from anything in particular as far as I could tell. It reminded me of models posed oh so artistically for an ad. Aesthetic ennui. As I watched, the wiry skinhead guy rose with his tray, unopened soda, untouched apple, and walked away with a quick, graceful lope that belonged on a runway. That's what I think a lope would look like. I watched, wondering if they had a dance company here in town, till he dumped his tray and glided through the back door, faster than I would have thought possible. My eyes darted back to the others who hadn't changed. Who are they? I asked the guy from my Spanish class, whose name I'd forgotten. Already once again with the cool kids. These other kids are just disposable. As he looked up to see who I meant, though he could probably guess from my tone, suddenly she looked at us, the perfect one. She looked at my neighbour for just a fraction of a second, and then her dark eyes flickered to mine. Long eyes, angled up at the corners, thick lashes. She looked away quickly, faster than I could, although I dropped my stare as soon as she glanced our way. I could feel the patches of red start to bloom in my face. In that brief flash of a glance, her face wasn't interested at all. It was like he'd called her name and she looked up in involuntary response, having already decided not to answer. My neighbour laughed once, uncomfortable, looking down at the table like I did. Or he laughed uncomfortably, maybe he would. Oh, here we go. He muttered his answer under his breath. Those are the Cullens and the Hales. Edith and Eleanor Cullen, Jessamine and Royal Hale. The one who left was Archie Cullen. They live with Dr. Cullen and her husband. Ooh! Carlisle is a lady and still a doctor. Progressive. So, Edith and Eleanor, Who's Eleanor? Jessamine, I'm guessing is Jasper. Oh, Royal Hale. Royal would be Rosalie, I'm guessing. The one who left was Archie. That's Alice. Which leaves Emmett. So Emmett is now Eleanor. Okay. I glanced sideways at the perfect girl, who was looking at her tray now, picking a bagel to pieces with thin, pale fingers. Her mouth was moving very quickly, her full lips barely opening. Probably like that. The other three looked away, but I still thought she might be speaking quietly to them. Weird names. Old-fashioned. The kind of names grandparents had. Like my name? Maybe that was the thing here. Small-town names? And then I finally remembered that my neighbour was named Jeremy. A totally normal name. There were 2 kids named Jeremy in my history class back home. This probably has relevance later on. They're all very good-looking. What an understatement. Yeah, Jeremy agreed with another laugh. They're all together, though. Royal and Eleanor, Archie and Jessamine. Like dating, you know? And they live together. He snickered and wagged his... wagged his eyebrows suggestively. Yeah, I can't waggle them. I don't know. I didn't know why, but his reaction made me want to defend them. Maybe just because he sounded so judgmental. But what could I say? I didn't know anything about them. Which ones are the Cullens? I asked, wanting to change the tone, but not the subject. They don't look related. Well, I mean, sort of. Oh, they're not. Dr. Cullen is really young, early 30s. The Cullen kids are all adopted. The Hales, the blondes, are brother and sister. Twins, I think, and they're some kind of foster kids. They look old for foster kids. They are now. Royal and Jessamine are both 18, but they've been with Mr. Cullen since they were little. He's their uncle, I think. It's actually kind of amazing for them to take care of all those kids when they're so young and everything. I guess so, Jeremy said, though it sounded like he'd rather not say anything positive. As if he didn't like the doctor and her husband for some reason. And the way he was looking at their adopted kids, I could guess there might be some jealousy involved. I think Dr. Cullen can't have any kids, though, he added, as if that somehow made what they were doing less admirable. Through all this conversation, I couldn't keep my eyes away from the strange family for more than a few seconds at a time. They continued to look at the walls and not eat. Pretty much my tactic in high school, actually. Oh, no, I read vampire books. I remember. Have they always lived in Forks? I asked. How could I never have noticed them during my summers here? No, they just moved down 2 years ago from somewhere in Alaska. I felt a strange wave of pity and relief. Pity because, as beautiful as they were still outsiders, not accepted. Relief that I wasn't the only newcomer here, and definitely not the most interesting by any standard. As I examined them again, the perfect girl, one of the Cullens, looked up and met my gaze, this time with obvious curiosity. That's me. That's me doing that. As I immediately looked away, I thought that her look held some kind of unanswered expectation. No, I don't know how to do it. Which one is the girl with the reddish-brown hair? I asked. I tried to glance casually in that direction, like I was just checking out the cafeteria. She was still staring at me, but not gawking like the other kids had today. She had this frustrated expression I didn't understand. I don't know. Probably like that. I looked down again. That's Edith. She's hot, sure, but don't waste your time. She doesn't go out with anyone. Apparently none of the guys here are good enough for her, Jeremy said sourly, then grunted. I wondered how many times she turned him down. I pressed my lips together to hide a smile. Probably what that looks like. Then I glanced at her again. Edith. Her face was turned away, but I thought from the shape of her cheek that she might be smiling too. After a few more minutes, the four of them left the table together. They all were seriously graceful, even the Golden Prom King. It was a strange thing to watch them in motion together. Edith didn't look at me again. I sat at the table with Jeremy and his friends longer than I would have if I'd been sitting alone. I didn't want to be late for class on my first day. One of my new acquaintances, who politely reminded me that his name was Alan, had biology too with me the next hour. We walked to class together in silence. He was probably shy like me. Or openly contemptuous of everybody like you. You're a dick, Beaufort. When we entered the classroom, Alan went to sit at a black-topped lab table, exactly like the ones I was used to at home. He already had a neighbour. In fact, all the tables were filled but one. Next to the centre aisle, I recognised Edith Cullen by her unusual metallic hair, sitting next to that single open seat. Fuck off. Just at least. She can wait. My heart started pounding a little faster than usual. As I walked down the aisle to do my required intro for the teacher and get my slip signed, I was watching her, trying to make it covert. Just as I passed, she suddenly went rigid in her seat. Her face jerked up towards mine so fast it surprised me, staring with the strangest expression. It was more than angry, it was furious, hostile. I don't know. Probably a lot like that. I looked away, stunned, going red again. I stumbled over a book in the walkway and had to catch myself on the edge of the table. The girl sitting there giggled. I'd been right about the eyes. They were black. Coal black. Mrs. Banner signed my slip and handed me a book with no-nonsense fun introductions and no mention of my full name. I could tell we were going to get along. Of course, she had no choice but to send me to the one open seat in the middle of the room. I kept my eyes down as I went to sit by her, confused and awkward, wondering what I could have done to earn the antagonistic glare she'd given me. Probably like that. I didn't look up as I set my book on the table and took my seat, but I saw her posture change from the corner of my eye. She was leaning away from me, sitting on the extreme edge of her chair and averting her face like she smelled something bad. Inconspicuously, I sniffed. My shirt smelled like laundry detergent. How could that be offensive? I scooted my chair to the right, giving her as much space as I could, and tried to pay attention to the teacher. The lecture was on cellular anatomy, something I'd already studied. I took notes carefully, always looking down. It's wise when you're taking notes. I couldn't stop myself from shooting the occasional glance at the strange girl next to me. Throughout the entire class, she never relaxed her stiff position on the edge of her chair, sitting as far off from me as possible, with her hair hiding most of her face. Her hand was clenched into a fist on top of her left thigh, tendons standing out under her bare skin. B-A-R-E. She doesn't have the skin of a bear. This too she never relaxed. She had the sleeves of her white Henley pushed up to her elbows, and her forearm flexed with surprisingly hard muscle beneath her pale skin. What's a Henley? I'm just going to assume it's some kind of massive fur coat. I couldn't help but notice how perfect that skin was. Not one freckle, not one scar. Oh, who's got scars? Oh, me, it's going. The class seemed to drag on longer than the rest. Was it because the day was finally ending, or because I was waiting for her tight fist to loosen? Sounds a bit rude, not sure why. It never did. She continued to sit so still, it looked like she wasn't even breathing. What was wrong with her? Was this how she usually acted? I questioned my quick judgment on Jeremy's sour grapes at lunch today. Maybe he wasn't just resentful. This couldn't have anything to do with me. She didn't know me from Adam. Mrs. Banner passed back some quizzes when the class was almost done. She handed me one to give to the girl. I glanced at the top automatically. 100%. And I'd been spelling her name wrong in my head. It was Edith, not Edith. This makes sense, hang on. E-D-Y-T-H-E. Editha. I'd never seen it spelled that way, but it fit her better. I glanced down at her as I slid the paper over, then instantly regretted it. She was glaring up at me again, her long black eyes full of revulsion. As I flinched away from the hate radiating from her, the phrase, "if looks could kill," suddenly ran through my mind. I mean, she's like... That probably looked really ugly, but I'm still not going to edit these videos, sorry. At that moment, the bell rang loudly, making me jump, and Edith Cullen was out of her seat. She moved like a dancer, every perfect line of her slim body in harmony with all the others, her back to me, and she was out the door before anyone else was out of their seat. I sat frozen in my seat, staring blankly after her. She was so harsh. I began gathering up my things slowly, trying to block out the confusion and guilt that filled me. Why should I feel guilty? I didn't do anything wrong. How could I have? I hadn't actually even met her. "Aren't you Beaufort Swan?" a female voice asked. I looked up to see a cute, baby-faced girl, her hair carefully flat-ironed into a pale blonde curtain, smiling at me in a friendly way. She obviously didn't think I smelled bad. I think this about a lot of strangers I meet, actually. Oh, he was friendly. He probably doesn't think I smell bad. I'm in there. Beau, I corrected. Her, smiling back. I corrected her, smiling back. "I'm Michaela." "Hi, Michaela. Do you need any help finding your next class?" "I'm headed to the gym, actually. I think I can find it." "That's my next class, too." She sounded thrilled, though it wasn't such a big coincidence in a school this small. We walked to class together. She was a chatterer. She supplied most of the conversation, which made it easy for me. She lived in California till she was 10, so she got how I felt about the sun. It turned out she'd been in my English class too. She was the nicest person I'd met today. But as we were entering the gym, she asked, "So, did you stab Edith Cullen with a pencil or what? I've never seen her act like that." I winced. I guess I wasn't the only one who had noticed. And apparently, that wasn't Edith Cullen's usual behaviour. I decided to play dumb. Was that the girl I sat next to in biology? Yeah, she said. She looked like she was in pain or something. I don't know, I responded. I never spoke to her. That's me playing dumb. I know. I have an amazing range. She's weird. Michaela lingered by me instead of heading to the dressing room. If I got to sit by you, I would have talked to you. I smiled at her before walking through the boys' locker room door. She was kind and seemed to like me, but that wasn't enough to make me forget the last strange hour. Excuse me. The gym teacher, Coach Clapp. That's fine. The gym teacher, Coach Clapp, found me a uniform, but she didn't make me dress down for today's class. At home, only 2 years of PE were required. Here, PE was mandatory all 4 years. My own special version of hell. I hated PE. I liked folk dancing, but all the rest of it just... I watched 4 volleyball games running simultaneously. Remembering how many injuries I had sustained and inflicted playing volleyball, I felt a little nauseated. The final bell rang at last. I walked slowly to the office to return my paperwork. The rain had faded away, but the wind was strong and colder. I zipped my jacket up and shoved my free hand into a pocket. When I walked into the warm office, I almost turned around and walked back out. Edith Cullen stood at the desk in front of me. Impossible not to recognize her tangled bronze hair. She didn't seem to notice the sound of my entrance. I stood pressed against the back wall, waiting for the balding receptionist to be free. She was arguing with him in a low, velvety voice. It's probably the kind of tone. The words aren't here, but that was probably the tone. I quickly picked up the gist of the argument. Oh shit, the words are here. Oh, I feel like an idiot. She was trying to trade from 6th hour biology to another time. Any other time. This could not be about me. It had to be something else. Something that happened before I got to the biology room. The look on her face must have been about some other problem. It was impossible that a stranger could take such a sudden, intense dislike to me without even knowing how... Oh, whatever. I wasn't interesting enough to be worth that strong of a reaction. Oh, there he is, correct. Yeah. The door opened again and the cold wind suddenly gusted through the room. Shut up! Rustling the papers on the desk, waving through my hair. The girl who came in merely stepped to the desk, placed a note in the wire basket, and walked out again. But Edith Cullen's back stiffened and she turned slowly to glare at me. Her face was ridiculously perfect. Not even one tiny flaw to make her seem human, with piercing, hate-filled eyes. For an instant I felt the oddest thrill of genuine fear raising the hair on my arms, as if she were going to pull a gun out and shoot me. The look only lasted a second, but it was colder than the freezing wind. She turned back to the receptionist. "Never mind then," she said quietly in a voice like silk. I won't do that. It's awful. I can see that it's impossible. Thank you so much for your help. And she turned on her heel without another look at me and disappeared out the door. I went robotically to the desk, my face white for once instead of red, and handed him the signed slip. "How did your first day go, son?" he asked. "Fine," I lied, my voice cracking. I could see I hadn't convinced him. He doesn't care. When I got to the truck, it was almost the last car in the lot. It seemed like a haven, already the closest thing to home I had in this wet green hell. I sat inside for a while, just staring out the windshield blankly. But soon I was cold enough to want the heater, so I turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I headed back to Charlie's house, Trying to think of nothing at all. And that's the end of chapter 1. Please join me again for chapter 2, which I will be reading in my timeline, my personal timeline, in about 30 seconds, but you probably won't see it for ages because our internet's terrible in New Zealand. Okay, thank you for watching. Bye.